What's up everyone and welcome back to the World History Channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. The biggest scandals from the court of Louis XIV. The most shocking aspect of the show Versailles is the fact that many, if not all, of the scandalous details depicted about daily life at Louis XIV court are real. The Sun King lived a sensual, unconventional life full of drama, mistresses, and intrigue. The actual events of Louis XIV's life are almost stranger than fiction. From a baby of African descent being born at Versailles to a wild carriage race between the Queen and the King's mistress, life for the French royals was never boring. And why was that necessary? The court was filled with beautiful and ambitious women, and men who had won their place in history as war heroes. During Louis XIV's time, things were bound to get scandalous because there were so many beautiful and ambitious people in one place. It's possible that the Queen had an affair with an African dwarf. The circumstances surrounding Sister Louise Marie-Thérese's upbringing are extremely murky. However, what historians do know is that she lived as a nun in Moret and was said to be of royal descent. However, most don't agree on exactly who her parents were. There is a theory that Queen Marie-Thérèse gave birth to a black child, but the child was not actually of African descent. The baby may have been born with dark blue or purple skin because it didn't get enough oxygen and died soon after birth, according to some historians. However, the more controversial version of the story asserts that either King Louis XIV or Queen Marie-Thérèse had an illegitimate child. Louis XIV had access to exotic African women, and Marie-Thérèse was said to have had a dwarf from Africa as her jester. Both of them could have been Louise Marie-Thérèse's parents, but history has forgotten the truth about her lineage. The Duchesse d'Orléans had an affair with her husband's bisexual lover. Guy Armand de Gramont, the Comte de Guiche, was known as one of the most handsome men in Louis XIV court. The Comte, better known as Armand, was bisexual and easily attracted partners of both genders. Armand and his sister were members of the household of the Duc and Duchesse d'Orléans, Philippe and Henriette, the king's brother and sister-in-law. Armand and Philippe had a close relationship, though it was reportedly not a balanced one. While Armand was more preoccupied with pursuing Philippe's wealth and power, Philippe had a profound love for his friend and lover. Armand showed the Duke very little respect, even kicking him during a masked ball. The greatest disrespect Armand showed to Philippe was sleeping with his wife, Henriette. Henriette and Armand started getting to know each other better at Philippe's request, but they went much further than they intended. They barely kept their affair a secret. In point of fact, there was one incident in which Philippe unexpectedly entered Henriette's rooms upstairs. At that point, Armand hid behind a door while a valet attempted to make a scene to cover for the lovers. Armand was able to get away unseen amid the chaos. Louis XIV's secret second marriage after his first wife, Marie-Thérèse d'Autriche, died suddenly in 1683. Louis XIV was not in a hurry to remarry. He had no interest in the available European princesses because he had produced an heir and successfully preserved the lineage. However, there was one woman who had his attention: Françoise d'Aubagne. She was born into poverty and was known as the Marquise de Maintenon at the time. Her first marriage was to a poet named Paul Seurat, and she became a widow at a young age. She worked in Versailles as a nanny to the illegitimate children of the palace. As she became closer and closer with the king, he supposedly fell in love with her. But the Marquise de Maintenon was religious. She did not feel comfortable living with Louis XIV out of wedlock. Despite the lack of tangible evidence, historians and authors like Aurora von Goethe insist that memoir evidence indicates the king secretly wed her. Due to her lower status, there were few witnesses, and everything was kept as quiet as possible. The Marquise de Maintenon experienced little change during the morganatic marriage. She did not gain any titles or rights to the monarchy, but she did have a place by Louis's side and apartments close to his from that time onward. Louise de la Vallière broke etiquette and raced the Queen's carriage. The War of Devolution began in 1667, and Louis XIV led the charge as city after city fell to his armies. His current mistress, Louise de la Vallière, deeply resented him when he was back in Paris. At the time, she was pregnant with their fourth child, and he was the only real love she had ever known. Determined to prove her love and impress him, Louise decided to join the rest of the court in traveling to meet up with the king, despite having been told to stay behind. When Louise's carriage got close to the queen's, she decided to break protocol and told her driver to pass the queen. Marie-Therese was not in any way amused by Louise's actions. In fact, she was so shocked that she vomited on her lady's skirts. When the caravan stopped, Marie-Therese's frosty attitude made it clear to Louise she should have stayed home. But Louise wasn't about to back down. When the court moved on and could see the king in the distance, she once again had her driver race past the queen's carriage. Louise emerged victorious after a frantic race between the two coaches to reach the king first. But instead of receiving an affectionate greeting from her lover, she heard him say only, "What, madam?" in front of the queen. Before he moved on, Louis XIV lost his virginity to a woman called One-Eyed Kate. When Louis XIV was 15 years old, his mother began her search for the woman who would introduce the young king to the act of procreation. It was incredibly important for Louis to produce an heir and a spare, as they say, to ensure the continuation of the royal line. However, historical consultant and author Aurora von Goethe outlined the exertion required by the queen to find the ideal partner for the execution of her son. The chosen woman must not have ambitions to rise above her current rank, be discreet, have some experience but not too much, be clean and free of diseases, and be charming but not too charming because the whole act will already be quite captivating. In the end, the queen settled on one of her own ladies-in-waiting, Catherine Henriette Bellier, also known as One-Eyed Catherine or Kate. She was not only known for being ugly as ugly can be, but she also lacked an eye. However, she followed the queen's instructions and reportedly did an outstanding job at taking Louis's virginity after he returned to his room one day to find her lying on his bed wearing almost nothing. The queen rewarded Catherine handsomely for her efforts. She received 2,000 livres, 2 townhouses, the title of Baroness, and the Hôtel de Beauvais. In fact, the hotel still stands today with the only surviving image of Catherine carved into the wall of the courtyard. Numerous royal court members were killed as a result of the poisons controversy. In 1678, rumors spread that one of Louis XIV court members was planning to poison him. Dozens of court members were found to have used potions or spells on the king, which revealed a vast underworld of secrets and magic. There was a thriving underworld of magicians and sorcerers in Paris at the time, and these people sold their wares to the ambitious members of the court. The people in Louis XIV inner circle had a lot of reasons to compete for his favor and attention because he could give them power, wealth, and social status at his discretion. This was primarily driven by ambition. One of the most anxious to secure her status as the king's primary mistress was Françoise Athénise de Roquecourt de Mortemart, Marquise of Montespan. People believed Madame de Montespan was a customer of the most notorious sorceress in Paris, known as La Voisin. Allegedly, she laced the king's food with love potions and aphrodisiacs she purchased from this magical underworld, on more than one occasion. In 1679 Louis XIV essentially criminalized magic and potion-making. In an event known afterward as the Affair of the Poisons, he formed a special tribunal that investigated 400 people over 3 years, sending 36 people to their death and 34 into exile. La Grande Mademoiselle fought hard to marry the Duc de Lauzun, and deeply regretted it. La Grande Mademoiselle was Anne-Marie-Louise d'Orléans, Duchesse de Montpensier. Despite receiving numerous marriage proposals, including one from Louis XIV himself, she had become an old maid of the court by her 40s. She was a cousin of Louis XIV. However, Antoine Nompart de Caumont, a charming but impolite man who was somewhat unattractive, finally caught her attention one day. He is better known today as Duc de Lauzun, a title he got later in life. He, regrettably, did not feel the same way, even though Mademoiselle fell head over heels in love with him. She did everything in her power to make him love her, and eventually he just gave in and agreed to marry her. But the engagement was short-lived and ended on what would have been the couple's wedding day. Once other members of the court realized Mademoiselle was marrying a man who was essentially a nobody, and far beneath her, the king withdrew his permission. Due to a number of fights with court members, Lauzun ended up in prison shortly after. Mademoiselle agreed to give up some of her wealth to free the man she loved after begging the king for 10 years. Reportedly they did finally get married, but their relationship was volatile and ended with Lauzun permanently kicked out of their home. The king's relationship with his sister-in-law was well known. The marriage between Henriette of England and the king's brother, Philippe, the Duc d'Orléans, at first appeared genuinely loving and relatively stable. However, the facade quickly crumbled as both parties began having affairs. Henriette, known at court as Madame, was very close with Louis XIV and served as a diplomat for France's dealings with England. She was also said to be very sexually close with him, according to rumor. There were plenty of rumors flying around Versailles regarding the intimate relationship between Henriette and Louis XIV, fueled by their many private rendezvous. Additionally, the possibility that Henriette was having an affair with the brother of her husband only heightened the scandal of the situation. Nicolas Fouquet became the richest man in France before going to prison for stealing from the king. Born into a wealthy family in 1615, Nicolas Fouquet was 17th-century France's version of Icarus. He rose up the political and social ladder continuously throughout his life as the son of a self-made nobleman. However, his time was up in 1661. Fouquet held high-ranking positions for decades that enabled him to divert funds that would otherwise have gone directly to the king. He became France's richest man in a short period of time, surpassing even Louis XIV in wealth. However, his lavish displays of wealth were his undoing, and the extravagant party he threw in August 1661 proved to Louis XIV that Fouquet had become too wealthy for his own good. Fouquet was detained by the king and put on trial for embezzlement. 3 years later he was found guilty, but managed to escape the usual death sentence. Instead he was threatened with expulsion from France, but Louis XIV was concerned about what a man with such powerful information could do in another country. Fouquet ended up in prison in Pignerol until his death on March 23, 1680. The Duchess of Orleans was considered to have been poisoned by some court members. Historians believe King Louis XIV's sister-in-law, Henriette of England, Duchesse d'Orléans, most likely died from natural causes. In the months leading up to her sudden and unexpected death, Madame complained of pains in her side and was generally in poor health. After returning from a diplomatic trip to England and traveling with Monsieur to St. Cloud, her health quickly worsened. She asked her husband to bring her a glass of chicory water on June 29, 1670. As she drank chicory water on a regular basis, she almost immediately cried out in pain and claimed she had been poisoned after drinking it. Suffering from an intense pain in her side, she was taken to her room where she died before the next morning. While lying in agony, Madame reportedly insisted multiple times she had been poisoned. However, the remainder of the chicory water was given to the hounds, and none suffered any side effects. Despite the lack of evidence, a rumor quickly spread that it was Madame's husband, Philippe, who had killed her. A second rumor began soon after, claiming Philippe's lover, the Chevalier de Lorraine, had actually poisoned Madame. Since Madame was partly to blame for him spending time in the worst French prison, it was likely that he had taken the action he did out of retaliation. In the end, an autopsy of Madame by well-respected surgeons revealed colic, gastroenteritis, and signs of gangrene on her organs. All natural causes. The most significant scandals from Louis XIV's reign, the court of Louis XIV, the Sun King, was a glittering display of power, opulence, and debauchery. However, beneath the surface of this glittering world was a world of scandal, conspiracy, and excess. In addition to serving as a venue for royal ceremonies, Versailles was also a hub for illicit relationships, political maneuvering, and shocking betrayals. It was the Grand Palace that would become the center of French political and social life. The television series Versailles captures much of this salacious drama, but the truth is often even more astonishing than fiction. The court of Louis XIV was a place where ambition and desire clashed in the most scandalous ways imaginable, with secret marriages, royal bastards, vicious rivalries, and sexual escapades among the many scandals. a royal bastard, or the mysterious Black Nun of Moret. One of the most enduring mysteries of Louis XIV's reign revolves around Sister Louise Marie-Therese, a nun of African descent who lived in the convent of Moret-sur-Loing. She was allegedly the illegitimate child of either the king or Marie-Therese, his queen. The circumstances of her birth remain shrouded in speculation, but several theories attempt to explain her existence. Due to oxygen deprivation at birth, some historians contend that Queen Marie-Therese gave birth to a child with darkened skin, a condition that may have resulted in the infant's death shortly after. The more scandalous version, on the other hand, asserts that the queen had an affair with a dwarf jester from Africa by the name of Nebo, who was a member of her household. The king was known to have relationships with women of various backgrounds, so it's possible that Louis XIV fathered the child with an African mistress. The presence of a black nun with royal connections fueled rumors for decades, despite the lack of conclusive evidence. Some stories even say that Louis XIV secretly visited her, which makes the mystery even more complicated. Sister Louise Marie-Therese is still one of the most enigmatic figures in Versailles, whether she was the result of an illicit affair or simply a figure of courtly intrigue. The Duchesse d'Orléans and her husband's bisexual lover, Philippe I, Duke of Orleans, Louis XIV's younger brother, was openly bisexual, a fact that was both accepted and exploited within the court. His marriage to Henriette of England, also known as Madame, was advantageous politically but difficult emotionally. The real scandal, however, involved Guy Armand de Gramont, the dashing Comte de Guiche, who was notorious for his affairs with both men and women. Armand was part of Philippe's inner circle and, by some accounts, his lover. However, Armand was also a notorious social climber who saw Philippe as a means to power rather than a romantic partner. Armand began having an affair with Philippe's own wife Henriette, in a shocking turn of events. The two carried on their liaison in secret, though rumors spread quickly. One particularly audacious incident nearly exposed them. Philippe unexpectedly entered Henriette's chambers while Armand was present, forcing the Count to hide behind a door. A quick-thinking valet caused a distraction, allowing Armand to escape undetected. The affair continued despite the close call until Henriette's untimely death in 1670, which some speculated was caused by poisoning, a scandal in and of itself. The covert marriage of Louis XIV and Madame de Maintenon after the death of his first wife, Marie-Therese, in 1683, Louis XIV shocked the court by secretly marrying Françoise d'Aubigné, the Marquise de Maintenon. Madame de Maintenon, in contrast to his previous mistresses, was a religious and knowledgeable individual who had overcome poverty to become one of Versailles' most influential figures. Their relationship began when she was hired as governess to the king's illegitimate children by Madame de Montespan. Over time, Louis grew deeply attached to her, but because of her low birth, an official marriage was impossible. Instead, they wed in a private ceremony with only a few witnesses. The marriage was morganatic, meaning Maintenon gained no royal titles, but she became the king's closest confidant, wielding immense political influence behind the scenes. Though no official record of the marriage exists, contemporaries like the Duc de Saint-Simon and foreign ambassadors wrote of it as an open secret. Maintenon's rise from obscurity to the king's bedchamber remains one of the most remarkable and scandalous stories of Louis XIV's reign. Louise de la Valliere's carriage race against the Queen. Louise de la Valliere, Louis XIV's first major mistress, was known for her gentle and submissive nature, until the day she defied royal protocol in a spectacular fashion. In 1667, while the king was away at war, Louise, pregnant with their fourth child, decided to join the court's journey to meet him, despite being ordered to stay behind. As the royal procession traveled, Louise's carriage drew close to that of Queen Marie-Therese. Unthinkable etiquette was broken when Louise ordered her driver to overtake the Queen's carriage in a moment of reckless passion. The Queen reportedly vomited in distress on her lady's skirts because she was so shocked. But Louise wasn't finished. When the king came into view, she raced the Queen's carriage again, this time winning the dash to reach him first. Instead of praising her boldness, Louis coldly rebuked her. "What, madam?" in front of the Queen, before turning away. The humiliating incident marked the beginning of Louise's decline in favor, and the king soon turned his affections toward Madame de Montespan, who was more cunning. The king's first sexual experience with one-eyed Kate. Louis XIV was a 15-year-old virgin whose mother, Anne of Austria, sought the ideal partner to introduce him to sex before he became the vivacious Sun King who was known for his numerous mistresses. The chosen candidate had to be experienced but not ambitious, discreet but not too alluring. The Queen's surprising choice. Catherine Henriette Bellier, Baroness de Beauvais, known as One-Eyed Kate for her infamous lack of beauty and missing eye. Despite her appearance, Catherine was bold and skilled in the art of seduction. One evening, she ambushed the young king in his chambers, lying nearly naked on his bed. The meeting went well, and according to reports, Louis was pleased with his initiation. As a reward, Catherine received wealth, land, and a prestigious title. A carving of her remains in the Hôtel de Beauvais in Paris, a testament to one of the most unusual but pivotal figures in the king's early life. The affair of the poisons. Murder, black magic, and high society. Perhaps the most infamous scandal of Louis XIV's reign was the affair of the poisons, 1677 to 1682, a sprawling investigation that exposed a network of fortune tellers, poisoners, and black market dealers operating within the highest circles of French society. The scandal began when police uncovered a ring of poison suppliers led by Catherine Monvoisin, known as La Voisin, who provided wealthy clients with love potions, abortion drugs, and even deadly poisons. Shockingly, many of her clients were aristocrats, including members of the royal court. Among the accused was Madame de Montespan, the king's most powerful mistress, who was alleged to have participated in black masses to maintain Louis's favor. Though she was never formally charged, the scandal tarnished her reputation, and she eventually fell from grace. The investigation led to executions, including La Voisin's public burning, and forced Louis XIV to suppress the trial to avoid further damaging the monarchy's image. The affair revealed the dark underbelly of Versailles, where ambition could drive even the most elite to murder. Conclusion: a court of endless intrigue. The court of Louis XIV was a world of unparalleled extravagance and ruthless ambition, where love, power, and betrayal intertwined in ways that continue to fascinate centuries later. From secret marriages and royal bastards to deadly poison plots and scandalous affairs, the Sun King's reign was as tumultuous as it was glorious. These scandals not only shaped the lives of those involved but also influenced the politics and culture of France, leaving behind a legacy as dramatic as the Palace of Versailles itself. Whether through passion, power, or sheer audacity, the figures of Louis XIV's court proved that behind the gold and glitter, the most shocking stories were often the truest.